personal finance is 80% behavior. It's only 20% head knowledge.
Yeah.
We all know what to do. We can Google and go, oh yeah, I should probably live on less than I make. And yet no one is doing it. And so it really is more about habits. And you can't create wealth unless you create the habits. And a lot of people are trying to shortcut that. They don't want to sacrifice. They don't have that muscle of delayed gratification. We want it now. And a lot of that is due to the world we live in. We have access to everything 24/7 all of the time. We don't want to wait. And if we can't wait a week for a shipment of something we didn't need, how are we going to be able to wait 40 years to retire with dignity? And that's, people aren't thinking long term because they're barely thinking about what's happening this weekend. We got to pause and take a step back and go, what is a long-term vision for our life? Because life is too short to live like this for another 20 years, which is what most people do.
Guys, help me welcome the one and only George Kamel. Dude, what's going on, man?
Not much. I have an 8-month-old, so that's taken up a lot of my time in the best way. And my wife recently retired from her career here at Ramsey Solutions to stay at home full time with our little daughter, Mia. So that's been the big life change. That's the big season we're in.
Yeah. Well, look, I'm super excited to talk to you for a variety of reasons, but one of the things that I love about kind of what you've been doing recently is you've done the hard work and you did it in a short amount of time. You know, a lot of folks talk about getting out of debt. They talk about building a strong financial foundation, but yet they never seem to get around to it. And I'm curious to know, why do you think they kind of put that off and put that off and put that off?
I think we have really good intentions, and I think at the heart of man is sort of this selfishness and desire to oppose the hard work and oppose the transformation and life change. And they go, yeah, I'll do that later. I'll save later. I'll get out of debt later. And to me, life is too short and too precious to waste it staying in debt and to waste it feeling broke. And so I see money now as a tool instead of an obstacle. And I wanted to do that in as short of a time as possible. And so sacrifice is a part of that for a season. But man, it's beautiful on the other side of that, 2-year journey to get out of debt. The next 20 years can be very rich and fulfilling.
For sure. Well, I think it goes for personal and business. You know, I used to complain because when I started the business I just exited recently, 25 years ago, I started with terrible credit, a quote unquote terrible credit score, got myself in all kinds of debt. Swore to myself that I would figure out a way out of it. And I slowly chunked my way out of it, which was a learning curve all itself. But then because of the bad credit, I couldn't borrow money from loans and banks and all kinds of stuff to, build a business. And at the time I was really, really bothered by that, because here I was trying to grind it, trying to make something happen, trying to make, create something out of thin air. And ultimately it ended up being one of the biggest blessings on my life. I was at a Christian conference recently speaking in Florida a couple of weeks ago. And one of the things that came up was, people were like, well, how do I get money? How do I get money to start my business? I'm like, dude, you don't need that. You just need grit and tenacity and the willingness to do it. All the businesses that I built, we built off cash.
Wow.
And the largest one, one of our best years was just under 9 figures. And, that's a 25-year history of working off of cash. And it's interesting when you work off of cash rather than debt, in a business and a personal sense, you decrease risk, but increase stability. So how did you kind of find yourself in that same mentality? Because what you did at your age is very uncommon.
Yeah. Well, I learned from the best. And Dave Ramsey has a very similar story. After he went bankrupt in the 80s, leveraging all this debt for his real estate portfolio, he built Ramsey Solutions at the speed of cash, built the building we're sitting in at the speed of cash. And with all of his real estate, he'll tell you, they cash flow pretty beautifully when they don't have debt attached to them. And I think people forget that. And the exponential, growth you can have as those wheels start turning and everything's cash flowing, you're able to do way more.
Yeah.
And so if you're just willing to have that delayed gratification, you'll see that blessing on the other side. And I found that in my personal life. When I got out of debt, it was countercultural. People were calling me crazy to, cut up my credit cards and stick to debit, and to not carry the car payment, instead pay cash for a simple, reasonable car. And upgrading my life at the speed of cash also gave me agency over my life.
Yeah.
Because debt is a shortcut. You really don't own anything. You didn't have to work to get it. All you had to do was keep up your stupid credit score, and the bank will be happy to loan you more money. But when I had the agency to pay off my own mortgage and lose all of the chains that I had with all these lenders, I was like, what else can't I accomplish? I had this come at me, bro energy, which for a guy who's 5'6" and doesn't work out is saying something. I'm no Steven.
Well,
And so,
I'm 5'5", so you got me by an inch. So
yes, I wouldn't take you in a fight. But there is a beauty to, I was just talking to a debt-free screamer on the stage. I hosted the Ramsey show and we had this beautiful debt-free scream. And you can tell the spirit of someone who has conquered debt is
yeah,
the spirit of someone who can conquer anything. They can conquer any
yeah,
problem in their life,
yeah,
whether that's a physical goal, a spiritual goal, a financial goal. There's nothing stopping them because they realized how much more control they had than they thought. And that's the beauty, the underpinning of the Ramsey plan is that freedom and autonomy and
yeah.
agency over your life.
Oh, and the new awesome book you got, Breaking Free from Broke. One of the again, there's an underlying message of it. I'm a believer. I know you're a believer. Um, I actually find it's actually a good thing people have gotten into debt and then gotten themselves out. And here's my random kind of weird thinking about it. I think you have a better appreciation of having that agency. You have a deeper level of character because you do that, which makes the work that you guys do so important. I was thinking through, kind of how Jesus handled sin, right? So, we've obviously all fallen short and had to kind of repent and get back there. But, I always think about the guy that's sitting next to Jesus on the cross. He confessed. It's like, I'm a sinner. I've done this. I've done this. I've done this. I've done this. Is there a place for me in heaven? He's like, you'll be with me in paradise. It just makes you wonder how grateful he was for that hopeful release. And I, as strange as it sounds, I see there's something um, very ministerial, I guess is the best way to say it. It's a ministry of sorts of getting out of debt and then having that liquid resource to go and invest the proper way,
Mm.
right?
Yeah,
So
that
talk to me a little
perspective
about.
changes everything.
Oh, absolutely. Well, talk to me a little about compounding interest and working for us and against us, because it's one of the things I obviously it's a huge takeaway in the book, and most people are under the wrong perspective from my perspective about what debt is and what debt is not.
Well, the way I see it, broke people pay interest, wealthy people earn it.
Ain't that
It's
the
that
truth?
simple. And most people out there, they're much smarter than me. And so they feel like, well, I'm going to make the spread and I'm going to leverage the debt. And they miscalculate the sort of risk meter in their brain and how much emotional mental weight that's taking up. I mean, I meet these people who are, like they're trying to hack the credit card and they're trying to play
Mhm.
all these games and they write essays about all the steps they had to take to sort of hack the system and beat it. And I go, what's way less brain calories is just bucking the system.
Yeah.
When I just budget and pay cash for my flight instead of hoping I have enough sky miles at the end of the year,
Yeah.
it's a simpler way to live and it gives me more agency to go, I'll fly when I want to on whatever airline has the best bang for my buck instead of being beholden to someone else's game. And
Yeah.
that's what I found with credit scores, with debt. You're always stuck playing someone else's game. There's always risk involved. And if you're a believer, I mean, the Bible never speaks positively about debt, not a
Yeah.
single time. It
Yeah.
says the borrower is slave to the lender. It doesn't say, unless you can get a 2% interest rate, make the spread. It doesn't have that
Yeah.
caveat, not even in the message version. And so it's a beautiful thing to realize while people can still build wealth with debt, it's a lot riskier. And that get rich quick mentality of taking those shortcuts ends up biting them the butt in the long run. And so I like the tortoise versus hare
Yeah.
mentality. I like the crock pot versus the microwave mentality. I think that's how we were created to live. I mean, Proverbs 13:11 says this, wealth gained hastily will dwindle, but whoever
Yeah.
gathers little by little will increase it. And so that tells me if you're moving slow, you're moving in the right direction at the right pace.
Absolutely. It's interesting that, you know, the principles we're discussing today, I know they've obviously made you have a seven-figure enough worth. I'm in a solid net worth myself, and it's all because of the ability to only basically use what's necessary. Warren Buffett said a long time ago, I think that if I'm recalling correctly, he's like, it's not about how much money you make, it's about how much money you keep.
That's
You
so
know?
true. Lifestyle creep is a real issue. Even with six-figure earners,
Yeah.
they don't have anything to show for it because their
Yeah.
lifestyle creeps up to meet their new income.
Yeah. Well, and then and what are you doing it for, right? I know it's a big, it's funny how we feel so insecure. We feel like we have to do so much to prove ourselves to so many that really don't pay any attention to us to begin with,
Mm.
right?
Yeah, that insecurity plays a huge part. Like I've said, the evidence of our envy is our debt, and
Yeah.
that's usually a flex to try to prop up this lifestyle and
Yeah.
show someone that we've made it. Whether that's a parent, oftentimes it's I want to prove to my dad that I'm finally the man. There's always that toxic sort of vibe, or if
Yeah.
it's the friends you're around, and I found if you're in a healthy place and you look at yourself in a healthy way and you're around healthy friends, you
Yeah.
can just just put that down and sort of become a person of character versus a person of status.
Dude, that is such a good moment. Person of character versus a person of stature or
That's
status.
hard. That's a
Yeah.
hard one. I mean, that's a daily choice you got to make.
It
Is that
is.
we're
It really
human.
is. Yeah. Well, and I think it's easy to in a world, and I know this is a culture concept that Ramsey Solutions and the whole team, yourself, and everybody tries to tackle on a daily basis, which is adjusting the culture to stop wanting to go into debt just to get stuff that you can't really afford now. Like hindsight being 2020, I'm actually so thankful that God held me in a season where I had to pay cash for everything. I mean, I've been able to build my businesses based on cash. And as a result, when I've had business struggles, and if you're in business, you're going to have business struggles from time to time, I didn't have catastrophic failure. During COVID, we had cash reserves. During the downturn in 2008, the company that I had started at 1998 was around during that season. And we actually sequentialed in size, ironically, because all of my competitors went out of business because of all the debt that they owed on boats and RVs and houses and all this kind
They
of
were over
stuff.
leveraged,
Yeah,
and you were the
100%.
last man standing.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think there's a truth to that, and if you handle your affairs in a fiscally responsible way, you're gonna have a lot of really good stuff. One of the things I was really happy you tackled in the book, was investment traps, because I think there's a lot of different types of things that come at us in a grand scheme of way that honestly are like, I mean, how do you evaluate what you should and shouldn't do? You finally save up a $10,000 and you're, at the teller to get ready to pay off your mortgage, and you how like, you don't know what to do. So let's break down some of those traps.
Yeah, there's so many social media hacks out there,
Mhm.
and at the root of them, I wrote about this at the end. There's these three stooges of wealth building, and they're fear, greed, and pride. And the
Mhm.
interesting part was I had studied all these investment traps, and I went, "There's a thread here," and
Yeah.
I went, "Oh, there's one of these emotions driving these, and they're all toxic. They're all out of a very negative place of fear." And we see that with
Yeah.
people buying gold. Gold is being pushed now when the economy's everything's on the fritz. Everyone needs to go buy gold or even crypto. The FOMO, that's
Yeah.
a version of fear, the fear of missing out. What if I miss out on this meme coin that ends up skyrocketing
Meme
and I
coin.
miss out on making a million, right?
Yeah.
And then you have greed. Those are the day traders, the sports bettors, maybe
Mhm.
pride going, like, you know what? I'm going to be the guy who knows what he's doing. I
Yeah.
know how to beat the house here. The house
Yeah.
doesn't always win. And that's when people lose their butts, is when they make decisions based on fear, greed, or pride. And so cryptocurrency is one of the traps I discuss. And again, I'm not even anti crypto, but it's crazy how defensive the crypto bros are out there,
Yeah.
calling me an idiot, saying I don't understand it just because I don't advise the everyday person to go in on it. I believe
Yeah.
they should be investing in their 401k before, the newest Shiba coin that's out there, or
Yeah.
even Bitcoin. And
Yeah.
so crypto is a big one I address. Sports betting is another one. We're seeing sports betting addictions and gambling
Mhm.
addictions start to pop up now as it
Yeah.
becomes, you combine the power of the smartphone on your brain with the power of gambling and then socialize that with all of your
Oh,
friends
man.
in
Yeah.
sports, something that you love.
Yeah.
That is a scary place to be. And we're starting to get more calls with people that have sports betting addictions, losing big money because they thought they were going to beat the bookies. So that's another one. Day trading has popped up a lot as well. The penny stocks, the guys who are
Mhm.
going to intraday trade and try to make a spread, or, forex currency trading. And then gold and precious metals have come back in a big way. And then the
Mhm.
big one I rail on in that chapter is permanent life insurance.
Yeah.
And this one has come back in a big way. And here's how you know it's about permanent life insurance. They never mention the word insurance, and it sounds
Mm.
too good to be true.
Yeah.
That's how you know the person behind the screen is trying to sell you life insurance as an investment scheme.
Yeah.
So this is whole life, this is index universal life, this is variable life. There's all forms of it,
Mhm.
but they always pitch it as this tax-free wealth strategist. Trust me, bro. Just give me the money, and I'll turn it into
Yeah.
this. And it's tax-free inheritance. And they pitch all of these benefits without telling you that your money's getting eaten up with all the premiums and fees and commissions they take.
Mhm.
And so we recommend term life for life insurance and investing for your investments. Do
Yeah.
not mix the two. It
Yeah.
never, like, if your auto insurance was like, "Hey, what if you could give me more and I'll invest for you?" You'd be like, "That's stupid. Why would I do that?" Well, that's what you're doing with life insurance.
Yeah.
Don't mix the two. And so those are some of the big traps I'm seeing out there. And again, they all come back to fear, greed, and pride. And I think building wealth is so much simpler than people think. Mutual funds, index funds, real estate, building a
Yeah.
business. Those are the tried and true ways.
Yeah. And one of the things I love about real estate specifically, a lot like the market, and mutual funds and whatnot, is it's a buy and hold approach. You know, I own real estate. I have a good sized portfolio in real estate, commercial and residential now, all paid cash. Don't owe any money,
Amazing.
right? So that's been a huge blessing. But when you look at the whole grand scheme of things, one of the things that I like is it's a fixed asset. It has an assignable and in many times an escalating value. Maybe it's a declining value for a year or two. Maybe we hit a bumpy economy. But if you're in a position where you're not financially strapped, where you have to have the cash to service some other kind of debt, right? You can buy and hold and actually pick up the escalation. The commercial property, one of the commercial properties that I own, I was able to pick up almost $2.5 million
Wow.
in increased asset value just because of the market conditions and some minor. When I say minor, about 20% of the number I just qualified for is what I had to reinvest and just kind of fixing things and making it look pretty and all that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah.
So when I start looking at that, what I'm having a hard time understanding is why people choose to invest in modalities that do have a tendency to lose. Or is it because they're not doing the research and just following the hype from the market? They're watching too much YouTube. By the way, guys, George's show is fantastic. It's hilarious and very informative. So make sure you check it
So
out.
kind. It's not all trash on YouTube. I'm on there too. Adding
No,
to
George's show's
the
awesome. It
noise.
really is. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm out here just sort of flying in the face of it all, just making people angry. So most of my engagement is just people disagreeing, but that's fine. As long as they're watching and having the conversation, I'm like, we're doing the Lord's work
That's right.
out here.
That's right.
But that's true when it comes to, assets versus liabilities. Most people, the liabilities are shinier and sexier in a way, right? We want
Yeah.
the nice car with a giant payment, even though that's going to go down in value while we pay interest on it.
Yeah.
That's most people. We're just buying stuff.
Yeah.
And when it comes to assets, there's only a few types that really hold, and that's real estate and the stock market as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you just
1,000%.
stick to those things, your money will grow exponentially over time.
Yeah.
And like you mentioned, you look at the home prices, the values of real estate, whether it's commercial, residential, from 10 years ago, 20 years ago, while it has dips, it also goes up over time.
Yeah.
We've never seen it where it stayed down and stayed there. Of course, it was, the 2008 crash. But man, if you bought in 2008 during the crash like Dave did, that really jumped back up. And the sizable, part of his net worth and his portfolio is because of having that position where he was in a position to buy up all of this real estate during a time when everyone had been over leveraged.
Yeah. It's funny. I did actually brought back a memory of one of my first mentors that taught me, get out of debt principles before I had a chance to kind of catch up with Dave and Sharon a long time ago. But it was interesting because he told me that one of the best financial principles I would ever know is to understand that a bull is always chasing the bear and the bear is always trying to bite the bull. So what he meant by that is in a bull market, there's a bear market around the corner. And when there's a bear market, there's a bull market around the corner. And he basically said the wealth principle that he shared with me at that point is you have to be in a position to buy anytime there's a bear market and you sell honestly in a bull market if you're going to sell a different different asset classes after the appreciation factor. Do you find that being
That's
true as
powerful.
well?
Yeah, I mean, if you just look at the return of the S&P 500, this is the benchmark that we use for the U.S. stock market, you will see that most of the time we're in the green. Now, that might be a little, it might be a lot. And there are those, it's kind of like this bull, 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 bear, bull, 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 bear, bear,
That's right.
bull, bull, bull. And so even when the times when there was a crash, if you look, rarely has there ever been a long period of time where it stayed down.
Yeah.
And usually it hits record highs in the first 2 years after that, bear market. And so that's a very encouraging thing to go, I'm okay riding this roller coaster because I know it has a happy ending if I just stay on the ride. But most people out there, they watch too much news, they get freaked out by the economy, and they go, I got to pull out all my investments. I'm going to put it in the settlement account in cash because I'm spooked by what could happen. And then they're going, why didn't my account grow? I went, why? I missed out on this growth. What happened? I went, well, you pulled all your money out at about the worst time.
Yeah.
Because right around the corner, it was going to climb back up. And I've seen this in my own family. And it's sad to see where I go, here's why your account didn't grow. You pulled it out or you put it all into bonds because you had very little risk tolerance. And to me, as long as you're diversified with your mutual funds and index funds, you're not in single stocks or any kind of risky, super volatile investments, over time, that's going to go up. And if you keep watching it day after day, you're going to freak out. And so it's sort of the set it and forget it. only pull from it when you need it mentality
Mhm.
versus this, I got to have this glaring in my face.
Yeah.
You see on the news, you see the green arrow, red arrow, green arrow,
Ex
red arrow. And depending on the day, you might be freaking out or doing jumping jacks.
Yeah.
That's no way to live.
No, it's a very bipolar lifestyle for 100%.
Exactly.
It's, going back to some of the questionable investments, and this kind of, tips into some of the insurance things we talked about. A lot of folks are, uh, looking at hardcore, what's called infinite banking. So I'd love to. I obviously I'm pretty familiar with Ramsey Solutions' stance on infinite banking, but for the sake of our audience, would you mind giving us a little rundown of what infinite banking is and while Ramsey Solutions yourself and everybody take the stance you do?
Yes, this ties back to that permanent life insurance scheme I was talking about. And
Mhm,
again, there's a reason why they don't say, "Hey, do you want to buy life insurance?" And instead they say, "What do you think about infinite banking?" You're like, "That sounds amazing. It sounds so cool.
mhm,
Sign me up." All this is borrowing money from yourself with interest
mhm,
inside of a life insurance plan. And so again, you're paying giant premiums. We're talking like 10x what it costs for term life insurance
mhm.
in order to play this game where you borrow your own money with interest, tax free, quote unquote. And
Yeah,
so it's a very confusing way to sort of make wealth. And so the idea is you're going to
yeah,
borrow this money, leverage that, and this is sort of this untouchable, nest egg you've built inside of this life insurance scheme, which by the way, takes decades to even build a serious cash value because
yeah.
of how little it grows, the terrible performance, how much of it is getting eaten up by fees. And so generally this is again pitched by these life insurance agents posing as quote wealth strategists that
Mhm,
are trying to get you to give them massive, we're talking hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars a month that
yeah,
they require in order to set up these accounts and keep them up. And if you don't keep them up, they start taking away from the cash value to pay the premiums. And so eventually it sort of self implodes because
mhm,
you run out of money
mhm.
because they're getting their money from somewhere. You don't
Yeah,
just stop paying. And so that's a really scary place. And for those that have these accounts set up, we always tell them, hey, get term life in place. Once you have term life insurance set up,
yeah.
cancel the whole life. And yes, there's going to be the surrender fees, and you'll take barely the cash value that you accumulated. And we call that a stupid tax. But
Yeah.
don't stay in it as part of a sunk cost fallacy.
Hey guys, I hope you're enjoying the show. Steven Scoggins here. I've got something that I think is absolutely going to blow your mind. Imagine taking your life and your business to the whole another level. I'm talking about an 8-figure level and beyond. You see, you've been working your butt off to build your business to where it is now. But what if you could work smarter, free up more time, make more money and impact along the way? How much would that be worth to you? You see, I can prove that basic steps, basic mindset shifts, and subtle changes can make the biggest difference. I want to introduce you to the 8-figure mindset makeover. It's absolutely free and it's here for you. It's a powerful summary of my top strategies that help propel me from the streets, if you will, to upwards of 9 figures and quote unquote success as we like to chase it. This is more than just tips though. It's a complete mindset overhaul with simple hacks that you can apply today to begin working on your unprecedented heights in your own business. I would like the honor to share these types of things with you that turn my dreams into reality so you can experience the same type of joy and freedom that I now get to live out in my own day. In other words, it's time for you to build your own unstoppable enterprise. And if you're really ready to take it to the next level and elevate your life and your business, this is an absolute game changer for you. So if you want to take advantage of this free resource, simply go to the show notes and click the link, or you can go to stevenscoggins.com/8-figure. That's stevenscoggins.com/8-figure. Until then, much love. God bless. Let's get back to the show. Take care. I want to maybe touch on credit cards a little bit because obviously credit cards, car loans, mortgages, those are probably the top three things that people, you know, put money into. All of them are debt service or debt devices, and mortgages are, I would argue they're more needed than not, but I would also advise a serious down payment, you know, so you get the down payment in the equity for early on. Anyway, long story short, the credit, let's talk about credit cards for a second. Let's say I'm a smart guy, you know, I
You
know
are. I can't argue with that. You have me so far.
I appreciate it. Thanks, man. But I'm John Doe in this case for sure. And I've got Sky Miles. I got I fly all over the place. Delta's good to me. They always, get me in, move me up a class and all this kind of stuff. And I pay my credit card off every month until. So talk to me about some of the lies and the credit card traps because again, this is one of the things I've been like super anal attentive about with my kids. And because they're like, well, I have to get a beacon score. I've got to do this. I'm like, no, you don't. I promise you, if you can put down 50% down on a house because you saved your money, you've done your due diligence, you can get a mortgage. Maybe not be the best
Oh,
thing to
yeah.
do, but you could do it, right? So talk to us about some of the tactics and the lies we hear about credit cards.
Yeah, it's definitely an interconnected web. As you started talking about credit score and sort of this gateway drug that we're sold as kids, and it's because of well-meaning parents who didn't have a lot of financial literacy who also fell for the traps.
Mhm.
And the credit companies love that we've all just sort of ingrained this into our minds that you need to have a credit score as an adult. So what do? You got to open a credit card and just make little purchases. And what does that do? It trains your brain to not have to use your own money and
Yeah.
not have to use your own money instantly. And so we train our brains to use other people's money that we pay back later and hope for the best.
Mhm.
And that leads to a life of more payments. It leads
Yeah.
to having a car payment, it leads to getting the student loans, it leads to taking on way too much mortgage, and all of a sudden, we can't pay off the balance.
Mhm.
Everyone opens a credit card thinking, "I'm never gonna carry a balance. It'll be fine. I'll
Oh,
get
I
my
need it for
discount, I'll get
emergencies
my miles."
until you own a
Right? Yeah,
pizza.
exactly.
Yeah.
And here we are. At the time I wrote the book, we were $1 trillion in debt. Now we're already at $1.2 trillion in credit card debt.
Mm.
And in comparison, we have about 1.57 in car loan debt in America and about 1.6 in student loan debt. And
Yeah.
so we are rivaling the amount of car loans and student loans just in credit card debt.
Yep.
These are balances people can't pay off. And we found that half of the people say they can't pay off the balance in full. And those are just the people who are honest with us. So who knows the other 50%, how honest they really are.
Sure.
And so on top of all that, carrying a balance that's now at 22% APR, there's also this idea of the credit card marketing really playing games with our brain.
Mhm.
I interviewed an ex-Capital One manager who told me that these companies run 10,000 experiments on consumers every year to try to get them to spend more, to try to get them to get into debt, to stay in debt. And it's through all the confusing point systems and
Yeah.
redemption. And it used to be cash back, which was simple. I could understand 2% cash back on purchases, whoopee. Then it became, well, you get points.
Mhm.
What is 10,000 points? I don't know, a $25 Amazon gift card? Who
Yeah.
knows? They get to decide. They get to devalue it at any time.
Yeah.
And then it became miles now. And so we see the Sky Miles as a big thing. Well, how much is 10,000 Sky Miles? Well, that gets you about a $250 flight. Okay. And we just play these games and look up and see hotel points and Sky Miles and cash back and think, I'm going to be the one to beat the system. I'm
Mhm.
going to use the rotating cash back, which, by the way, is usually for luxury spending, like
Yeah.
eating out, restaurants, entertainment, not for necessities of life,
Yeah.
which just means we're going to encourage bad consumer spending and then give them back 5%.
Yeah. Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but
That's not enough to make this game worth it.
well, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's a national stat, if I believe it's like 86 or 90, close to 90% of people, who have basically started using credit cards, who swore they'd never go into debt or they'd pay it off before the end of the month or whatever, they end up largely in debt, paying all kinds of massive fees. Is that still holding true? Is it still in the high 80s and 90s?
Yeah, I believe that was the most recent stat I've seen, and I probably quoted one of those in the book. And what we found is that whether or not they have a balance, they're still going to pay. And
Yeah.
I outline all the fees these credit card companies start charging you, and the late
Mhm.
fees and the annual fees.
Yep.
Well, now you want to spend enough to make up for the annual fee. So you've
Yeah.
already built in a psychological financial game where you have to spend enough to get 700 back to cover the fee that they charge you.
Yeah.
And so all of this adds to a mess of a maze, and you feel like if I get to the cheese, I'm winning, until you zoom out and realize, no, you're a rat in someone else's maze that got the cheese.
Yeah.
You are playing someone else's game. And so in the book, I outline all of the objections I've heard over my 11 years here at Ramsey over why people will not ditch the credit cards.
Yeah.
And I did my best to change people's minds, and it's working. One of my
Yeah.
friends who is one of the most, he's got 20 credit cards, and I convinced him to start cutting these up after he read this chapter, and he went, that was the most convincing chapter I've ever seen. Well
That's so
written with
good.
data, not just anger and opinions,
Yeah.
but just true data. And I
Yeah.
hit all the mental objections and all the character archetypes, that the rewards
Mhm.
redeemer, the perfect spender, the world traveler, the fraud protector, the emergency shelter. I found everyone's got their own reasons.
Mhm.
A lot of times there's 3 or more reasons why they keep the credit cards. One is the rewards. One is the what if an emergency happens? Another one is, well, what if I have fraud? And they just think the credit card is going to make my life easier. And I'll tell you, as I've been taking calls on the Ramsey Show and doing this for a while now, credit cards are not a blessing to anyone's life. You
No,
can do
they're
all the
not.
same things
Yeah.
with a debit card, including rent a car, rent a hotel. I've even got a mortgage without a credit score. And so I
Mhm.
didn't need any cards anymore. And so
Yeah.
there's all kinds of ways around it. And people are like, well, that's more difficult. I'm like, you want to talk difficult? Good luck redeeming some of these freaking sky miles and points
Yeah.
and trying to hack your way into getting a first class flight. And so they've just done a masterful job at marketing. And it's the reason why Capital One is sponsoring the Taylor Swift tour and we can't afford tickets to the Taylor Swift tour. There's a reason they have the big buildings downtown and
You
we
have to
can't
finance
afford.
the Taylor Swift tour by Capital One.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so if you think you're winning, the credit card companies love that for you. They go, absolutely, you're winning. Keep
Yeah.
spending. You're doing
Yeah.
great.
Well, and it comes down to human behavior, right? So that it's funny is I was just thinking too that when COVID happened, you and others in the Ramsey team were saying, "Hey, this is going to be a pendulum." Yeah, you're going to get some free money. Some of you guys who are watching the show and listening to us are going to take that money and get yourselves out of debt and start working on that debt snowball and really start getting your way out of it. And he goes, and you guys told everybody, but I want you to be cautious that you don't get too comfortable, too complacent, because when the economy returns, we knew it would, it was a matter of time. And if we start swinging back towards a healthy economy and really kind of start walking through things, a lot of you guys are gonna be tempted to go back into debt because all of a sudden this job that you thought you might lose, not only did you keep because you added value to yourself, you were able to earn a higher wage and all this kind of stuff. Human behavior is predictable. And that's one of the things I love about the Ramsey Solution teams. I love about the book is you're trying to activate and change and transition actual human behavior with logic and not emotion. And I find that most of us spend money with emotion and not with our minds.
Absolutely. Dave's been saying for 30 years now, personal finance is 80% behavior. It's only 20% head knowledge.
Yeah.
We all know what to do. We can Google and go,
Yeah.
oh yeah, I should probably live on less than I make. And yet no one is doing it. And so it really is more about habits. And you can't create wealth unless you create the habits. And a lot of people are trying to shortcut that. They don't want to sacrifice. They don't have that muscle of delayed gratification. We want it now. And a lot of that is due to the world we live in.
Yeah.
Things feel out of control. We're too busy. We have access to everything 24/7 all of the time. We don't want to wait. And we want it, Amazon Prime now. In 2 hours, it better be at my door. I can't wait to a week for this thing. And if we can't wait a week for a shipment of something we didn't need, how are we
Yeah.
going to be able to wait 40 years to retire with dignity and invest consistently? And that's people aren't thinking long term because they're barely thinking about what's happening this weekend. We're too
Yeah.
scattered, and we got to pause and take a step back and go, what is a long term vision for our life? Because life is too short to live like this for another 20 years, which is what
Mhm.
most people do.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about generations a little bit. Each generation seems to have its own behavior pattern. X and Gen Z and all this kind of stuff, right? What types of trends? Because I know you guys do an enormous amount of studying. I know an enormous amount of analytics to make sure the data that you're providing to the market is the absolute best data and tools and techniques, smart dollar and all these different resources. Eh, What are you seeing in the marketplace and how are you guys affecting change?
Well, I've done some YouTube videos talking about the different generations and even looking at their debt levels, what trends they're falling for. And, there's obviously people doing well on both sides. There's some Gen Zers that call into the show, and I'm like, you don't need me. You need to be teaching me. You're 18 years old with $30,000 saved, and you're working in the trades with no
Mhm.
debt. You're crushing
Yeah.
it. Then we also meet the boomer who's, 64 years old, has no nest egg, and they're saying, hey, I'd like to retire. What do I do? And I'm going, get a time machine and go back in
Yeah.
time and invest. And so it's hard to pinpoint this generation's crushing it, this one's not. Everyone has a different set of problems. I think
Mhm.
the boomers are realizing that they didn't do a good enough job setting themselves up for retirement.
Mhm.
And they're still now going backwards by taking out HELOCs and taking out Parent Plus loans for their kids that they're still paying off. And
Mhm.
then we see, Generation X, largely, in some of the studies, they're sort of strapped the most because they're in the
Mhm.
sandwich generation. They're trying to take care of their parents who are now way up there in aging
Yeah.
while also trying to raise the kids and put them in private school and give them a better life than they had. And so they're sort of stuck in this sandwich where money's coming out both ways. They're trying to
Yeah.
take care of the parents who didn't prepare and trying to take care of the kids so they don't screw their lives up. Then you
Yeah.
have the millennials like me who are trying to enter the housing market in a very difficult time going, well, easy for my parents to say they've got this
Mhm.
home that they paid 150,000 for that's
Yeah.
now worth 700 and this homes that I want are now 5, 600 and I'm broke, strapped with student loan payments. Please government
Mhm.
do something about this. Forgive
Yep.
the debt. And they still have the car payment that they can't get rid of. Car prices are out of control. And then of course you have Gen Z who's kind of in a lot of ways smarter because they're looking at all the other generations going, ugh, I don't want to end up like that. Oof,
Yeah.
I don't want to do that. But what that means is they're also trying to take a lot of shortcuts because they're
Mhm.
real smart. They're smarter than us. They're better with technology. They're better with
Yeah.
social media. And they have an entrepreneurial spirit where they go, I don't want to work for the man. The
Yeah.
pension doesn't exist anymore. I got to build something for myself. And so I think we're going to see a lot of cool businesses being formed, a lot of innovation from
Mhm.
Gen Z, but they're also the most likely to need to keep up the social facade.
For sure.
Being
Yeah.
younger, being on social media, there's a lot of that comparisons of where are my
Mhm.
friends at? What does my life look like?
Yeah.
While they also struggle with anxiety for all the
Yeah.
normal reasons. And so they're falling for things like buy now, pay later. They're
Mhm.
anti-credit card because they're going, I saw my brother and sister and mom and dad go into credit card debt. That's bad. 22% APR, bad.
Yeah.
Buy now, pay later. Okay, now we're talking. No, no late fees, no interest. I can get behind this to free up some money in my budget. And so they have their own lane that they're running in, and they're falling for different traps and crypto and some of the newer trends. But I think everyone's got their problems and everyone's got their pros and cons. And at the same time, I believe everyone can build wealth if they're able to just all zoom out and go, I'm going to put some blinders on and go, what does the
Mhm.
next 10 years look like? Even if I'm 55, what does
Mhm.
65 look like if I can get my mortgage paid off
Yeah.
and retire with dignity? And for
Yeah.
the 18-year-old, what does it look like at 28 if I can stay debt free, upgrade
Mhm.
my car in cash? I might be able to pay cash for a home if I do it the right way. These
Yeah.
are the kind of stories we actually see on the Ramsey show. These are not fairy tales, but it starts with that paradigm shift going, I'm done playing the culture's
Yeah.
games.
Yeah. Love that, and it's also true. It's funny, I'm gonna tie in 2 things together in the last few minutes together. I wanna go to the college concept a little bit, and only because I didn't graduate college. I barely got my GED, and I went on to build a sizable business and then, recently exited. Now I'm building the next business because I like building businesses.
That's
Um,
amazing. Hey, it worked out for you.
it
That's
did.
incredible.
It did, but I guess my point is I'm seeing a trend that people are not as sold on going into major debt in college, and I think the ratio last I saw was also in the high 80s, where someone goes to college, they don't end up in the field that they went to college for, but they end up with the debt that goes with it. And now we've got, different presidential powers saying we're gonna forgive this or try to forgive that. At the end of the day, somebody's paying for that. That stuff's not it's not free money. It didn't just evaporate into thin air. So I want to talk about a little bit about that, but also if there's a way to wrap it in, I want to know why you chose to write this particular book in this particular season. Now, what was on your heart and your mind that you were seeing that the problem you were trying to solve, if you will?
Yeah, I mean, this all stems from people realizing that the world is broke. I think we can all agree everyone feels broke, a lot of people are broke, and everyone wants to break free from that in their own
Mhm.
way. And they have all different solutions. I think mine is the best solution because I think it works for everyone,
Yeah.
regardless of where you came from, regardless of who you are. But the younger generations do have an aversion to college because they've sort of seen their family fall into the trap of going, wait, you went $150,000 into debt for a degree that didn't have a job at the end? That
Mhm.
doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
They're catching on to this stuff. They're
Yeah.
smart. And so they're going, what if I could just learn a trade? Or what if I could go and start a business
Mhm.
that could produce that same amount of income without having to waste 4 years at an institution
Yeah.
getting a degree that didn't have marketplace value? And so I'm not anti-education. I think that college can be a great thing for a lot of people, but you got to think, is this the only way and is it the best way, as my friend Ken Coleman says, to have the career I want?
Mhm.
And we've trained kids to only look at great schools and famous schools and what the degree is, and that we haven't really trained them to think about what they're wired to do and what
Mhm.
career that might lead to. And that's why I love the work my friend Ken Coleman is doing. Be sure to check that out. We need to be better at that piece of it for kids to
Yeah.
then let them decide, hey, you don't need to go to college. Don't go to college because it's your mom and dad's alma mater and you want to make them proud joining the same fraternity or sorority. Terrible
Yeah.
reason to go. Don't go because of the freaking football team or the water
Yeah.
slide or the Michelin star cafeteria. These are also terrible reasons.
Yeah.
Colleges do this because they know it's going to increase enrollment, increase profit, increase endowment, increase the whole program for alumni association and all of this stuff. We've got to start going to college for the right reason. We've
Yeah.
lost sight, and I think the younger generations are realizing that, and they're going, I've learned more from YouTube than I have from a
Yeah.
college course in a
Yeah.
lot of ways. We have access to so much information that they're going, I'm just going to go try some things. And I think that's a beautiful thing. And that's why we're going to start to see way more entrepreneurs pop
Yeah.
up And we're going to see education shift. And I think it's due time.
Yeah.
And that steps into why I wrote this book in this time, in this season. I was tired of seeing people, number one, feel hopeless when it came to building wealth in America.
Yeah.
Because my story, coming from an immigrant family, very middle class, outside of Boston, Massachusetts, going from $40,000 in debt to net worth millionaire under 10 years. As a W-2 employee, I went, oh my gosh, I'm like very average. I'm like the average dude. I'm not a prodigy. I didn't do anything fancy. I just invested in my 401k. I knocked out the debt, got an emergency fund, met my wife here, got aligned with my spouse on money goals, and we just built wealth together.
Yeah.
And there's no real it's kind of boring. And you kind of go, wait, that's it? There's got to be more. No, we worked on our careers. We got promotions. She now stays at home with our daughter. And that was a decision we got to make because of the way we set ourselves up.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people, they see money as an obstacle. And I wanted them to see it as a tool. And if they could break free from broke and buck this toxic money system that is surrounding us with heavy duty marketing, with tons of debt traps, man, if we could rise above that and build wealth and become people of character, that's what it's all about. And that's why the intro of my book at the very front title page, I have the fruits of the spirit verse on there.
Genesis.
I think that's really who we want to become. We want to become people who have self-control, who are generous with our time and our resources, who have confidence and peace about the future, who have serenity. And I think money, if we can talk about money, we can stop talking about money.
Yeah.
And so if we can just talk about it and have you deal with it, then it just becomes a tool to use instead of a thing to complain about. And that's the beauty. That's kind of where I end the book, is talking about hope versus cynicism and who do you want to become? What life do you want to lead? And stop letting money become an obstacle. I'm tired of it. I think we were made for more than that. And regardless of your generation and where you came from, we can all grow in this area. We have control. We have more control than we think.
Man, as I was just thinking, the concept of let's just talk about it. We can stop talking about it. That is such a pivotal principle and life truth in marriage, finance, all of it. How much of stuff is unresolved conflict? I know it's a principle from Montre, to get conflict resolved as quickly as possible. Well, a couple
we don't
of different
talk
things.
about it.
Yeah, 100%. And I know we're basically out of time, but I want to encourage the audience right now to go and get a copy of the book. I actually would like to encourage them to get a few copies of the book, and here's why. We all know someone who's under financial stress and duress. We all know someone. And a lot of our audience is very successful in the entrepreneurship category and probably have done pretty well in some wealth and some wealth building. I'm sure there's room for improvement. We all got room for improvement. But at the same time, we all know people who are coming to us, people that, have managed to build some solid net worth and be debt free and have some cash on hand, where people are trying to borrow money and it kind of makes you feel. Anyway, long story short is I want to encourage everybody to grab the book. I just want you to get a couple for people that that are also in a financial duressful season. I actually feel like that's the greatest service of love that you guys can do. And for everyone watching, I also want you to go check out George's show on YouTube. I'm telling you, it's not your normal YouTube show. It is fun. It is energetic, and it is full of valuable information, dude. So, George, thank you so much for being on the show, brother. I really appreciate you. Love you, man. And if we can support you in any way, just let us know.
Thank you. Well, thank you for helping me spread the word. And you are a pro at what you do, and congrats on all the success. It's well-deserved.
Thank you, my brother. Chat soon.
Have a good one.
I hope you liked that video. And if you did, make sure you check out this next video right here.
I think hard times are coming, which is great. It's motivating. And it's not a time to get fearful or scared. It's a time to prepare.